Season 3 of The Fairer Cents is sponsored by FreshBooks, the cloud accounting software for freelancers that's the easiest possible way to send invoices and stay on top of your accounting. Stay tuned for info on how you can get a free 30-day trial while supporting the show. Welcome to The Fairer Cents.
With me, Tanya.
And me, Kara.
Women, money, and the fight to break even.
Because we give a shit. And you should too. Today, what it means to be a strong woman with personal finance giant Suze Orman.
Hey, Kara.
Hey, Tanya.
Woo! Season 3.
I know. Welcome back. It's so exciting. Everything is great. I'm so jazzed to be here.
Me too. I feel like we're in a groove now, but then we've also had a little break, which was good and necessary and let us pull lots of really exciting stuff together for this new season of The Fairer Cents. But yeah, it feels so good to be back chatting with you.
I know the breaks are wonderful. And I do feel like it gives people a chance to miss us. You know, absence makes the heart grow fonder sort of thing. But it does feel great to be back in the saddle, to use my Texas cowboy metaphors here. And we are really kicking off season 3 with a bang.
Yeah, we so are. I think, the reality is we can't do this show every week. Even if this was our full-time job, the way that we think about the show and have themes and have different guests, it's just not something that we can do if we were just playing an interview with one person straight through. We could do that every week, but this is something that takes a little longer. So the breaks are something we have to do. But the good thing is now we're going into season 3 knowing a lot of what's coming up. And today it includes, just like, how do we even describe her? Like, huge giant of the personal finance world, Suze Orman, with whom we had a wild and wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, Suze has been famous for longer than I've been alive, which is, intimidating in the best way. She really has been the most prominent female voice on personal finance in the United States for decades. And certainly she has a personality unto herself, which is great. And we're going to talk a lot about. But it is wild to have her on the show.
Yeah, I think of that experience when we chatted with her as like weathering Hurricane Suze. Like, she is just a force of nature, and you come in and just try to point her in the right direction, but then let her just go and talk, as folks will hear. But I do think we were able to have a really cool conversation with her and get into some stuff that I don't feel like she talks about in a lot of places. And a lot of that is really around today's theme, which is what it means to be a strong woman and how you become one and what that looks like in the world and how people perceive you. And yeah, there's sort of, to me, no better person to talk to about that experience than her, who's, that is her trademark, is just being seen as this world beater, ball buster, like super, super strong woman. So there's a lot we can learn from her. Even if you aren't a huge fan, I still think there's a ton in the conversation that is just really interesting.
Yeah, longtime listeners know we really do strive to share stories or to share aspects of stories that are not being told elsewhere. That is a core belief of the Fairer Cents. And we got to talk to Suze about some things that I have never really heard her talk about anywhere else. So I feel really lucky for that conversation.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to share it in a little bit. But I think first, let's talk about the theme, which is what it means to be a strong woman and how we navigate the world as women. And it's sort of the reality that there's no separating who we are and how we present in the world with how people perceive us and the baggage that they're going to bring to that and how that's different because we are women. That's something that I think we think about a lot for this show when we talk about succeeding in your career or just kind of operating in the world generally. But we really wanted to get into that of what does it mean to be strong? What does it look like to be strong? What are the pitfalls of being seen as strong? And is that something that changes over time?
As you know, I was voted most argumentative 06. And I feel like the definition of a strong woman has fluctuated in some ways over the last several decades, but in many ways, it's always meant one thing, right? Strong meaning masculine or displaying strength like a man. And that's, take no shit. That's ball busting. That's I wear the pants. So literally, I wear a pantsuit, or figuratively, it's I can hang with the guys. I can take the jokes. I can dodge the bullets in the action movies, And the women who kind of like myself fall more naturally into this, I have no problem with confrontation. I'm happy to speak up. I am very confident and am happy to argue specifically at any time, fall more naturally into that definition. But the women who don't, you can still be strong in many ways, but we haven't always made space for that in our personal finance world or in our greater societal world.
I keep thinking with this episode how relevant it is to go back to season 2, the episode that we did on toxic masculinity, number 15. That to me is such a great reference for this, because we're sort of talking about in this society in which there is so much toxic masculinity and masculinity means one thing. There was a time, I think, where it meant having to emulate some of that in order to be a strong woman. I think about just in the course of my career, which was not super long, obviously. I retired in my late 30s, but I worked for the same company in political consulting for about 16 years and got exposure to a ton of different people and women over that time, and really noticed, I think in the DC political world, I think it's maybe more noticeable than in other career paths or other fields, that the women who made it, who were of a certain generation, like probably the younger baby boomers, did it by being very abrasive and by being, we've talked about how much we both hate the B word, but I think the type of women who might be described that way. And it's so hard to know what it would have been like without that societal pressure, but it's so clear to me that there was a time where that was how you got ahead. That was how you succeeded as a woman in a boys club kind of industry, was just by putting on the pants and sort of denying any aspect of yourself that might be seen as feminine. Whereas I think and hope now there's more space to be kinder and gentler in the world, and especially in the workplace and in financial situations, not because women need to be gentler, but just because we all should be, because everyone should be looking out for one another and thinking about others in all things instead, not just looking out for yourself. So that I think is an interesting thing to have observed just over the course of my career, is that now I think we're in a place where you can be more feminine, quote unquote, and still succeed. But that doesn't mean you can be seen as a pushover or seen as someone who's just always collaborating and not sticking up for yourself. I mean, as we've talked about in many episodes, like the ones about breaking into the boys club, which was episodes 17 and 18 in season 2. There's just so much baggage here, but hopefully it's trending in the right direction. I don't know. What do you think?
I think, first of all, there is nothing weak about kindness and gentleness. There's nothing weak about being a good listener. There's nothing weak about making space at the table for new voices and different experiences. And I think we live, especially in the US, in a world that says those things are weak. If you're a nice boss, you can't be a good boss. If you're not one of those ridiculous, I'm going to say it, tech bros. It's I work 18 hours a day and exist off Red Bull and I'm so dedicated to the job. If you're not doing that, you're not a good worker. You're not committed. And I think we see this in the personal finance space a lot, especially in this, competition of frugality, where it's well, if you're not keeping your house at the coldest possible temperature.
Hey, now.
Sure.
Hey now.
I know. I almost didn't say it. I was oh, Keurig shot of Tanya. I don't know. But no, I'm thinking more the people who are you don't need to buy a pillow, just stuff a bunch of t-shirts into a pillowcase. And
oh my God, who says
pillow.
That? You're allowed to have a pillow.
It's out there. People say it. And it's just this idea that success involves pushing yourself to the extreme. Or if you kind of don't do things to the most extreme, did you even really succeed? Or are you even really a boss? And it's yes, I can still be successful. I can still be strong. I can still be all of these positive things if I'm not doing it that way. So I do think there is more space for that, especially as women get into more positions in our politics, in our leadership, in companies, on boards, et cetera. As women just create more spaces and share more of their experiences, I think we are seeing more definitions of what strong looks like. I do still think we have a long way to go. I am hopeful. And I think, too, it's also very true that you can have an aspect that is traditionally strong, I'm using air quotes, and of yourself. And you can also have an aspect of yourself that is soft. And both of those can contribute to your success in this world.
I think that the hard thing is, and the thing that tells me that we're not there yet, is examples like Sheryl Sandberg, who we've talked about before. Her book, Lean In, is sort of the manual for privileged women to talk about getting ahead in their careers while still having a family life and doing all of the things that are part of motherhood. And the hard thing is, for those who've followed the news about Facebook and the Russian interference in the elections, I mean, like, seeing the backroom accounts of Sheryl Sandberg's behavior and how ruthless she is, and just how she put her own reputation and the company's reputation above our democracy and the health of it. I mean, that stuff is so contradictory with her lean in sort of like soft management message that that tells me she is not balancing the hard and soft. Like, her hard and soft are kind of different people. And that's not what we should be striving for. We should be striving for a world in which we can be hard and soft, strong and vulnerable, all in one package in a way that feels authentic. And that is, like, I mean, not feels authentic, that is authentic, that is us, that is true to who we are, and isn't like cutthroat over here and then warm and fuzzy over here.
When we have leaders who cannot take into account other experiences or other definitions of strength or of success, they don't create policies that allow people with chronic illnesses to thrive in that workplace. They don't look outside of their own lived experience for other people and make space for them at the table. You know, if you look around and you think, I want people who are going to devote 80 hours a week every week to this, how's that going to work for someone with a child who has to be there to pick them up? How's that going to work for someone who has a parent who stays in their home and needs to be given their medication at a certain time? It's not. So you're automatically excluding these people and you're not giving them a chance. And therefore, we continue down this fairly fucked up road of who's at the top, who gets to stay there, who gets invited, and how are we even creating ideas. I think about all the time the amount of creativity and innovation that is lost because we insist that the only people who should be allowed to say something and be believed and encouraged is such a narrow pool of people. And so it was really interesting to talk to Suze, who has in many ways thrived with these traditional definitions, and then to be sort of the new generation of personal finance folks and how we feel about moving our field forward.
Together, for the first time ever, talked to Suze Orman, who is certainly someone who's been around in personal finance media for decades. She recently reissued her 2007 book, Women and Money, and has updated it for the Me Too era. And we talked with her about a whole bunch of things, from her origin story to what it means to her to be gay, to how she navigated the boys' club. We wanted to talk with her about how she became the person that we all know and love, or know and hate today.
I'm not sure that I feel that I had to fight harder than women have to fight today, to tell you the truth. Even though I was a waitress till I was 30 years of age, having been a waitress for 7 years, making $400 a month, my career started by an accident, so to speak, of that I wanted to stay being a waitress. I just wanted to open up my own restaurant. And so all the customers I had been waiting on all those years, because my parents had no money. I was raised on the south side of Chicago, and there was just never any money. And had given me $50,000 to open up my own restaurant as a loan. And so I went to Merrill Lynch, which was a brokerage firm. I didn't even know what that was at the time, in 1980. And I gave the broker of the day all $50,000 to say that it was for my, restaurant. And to make a very long story short, within 3 months, all $50,000 was lost to the options market. And so my dream went down the drain with that as well. So I thought, I know I can be a broker. They just make you broker, because how was I going to pay these people back at $400 a month? So I went in my red and white striped Sassoon pants tucked into white cowboy boots and a blue silk shirt. I was a size 6 back then, to get a job at Merrill Lynch. And before you know it, I'm in the manager's office. And he proceeds to say to me, women belong barefoot and pregnant, but I will hire you. But in 6 months, I will fire you. Now, it didn't take me long to realize they were hiring me because they didn't have any women, and affirmative action was in 1980. That he was just going to hire me and then fire me. So, of course, I said, well, how much are you going to pay to make me pregnant? And when he told me $1,500 a month, I realized in 6 months, it was $9,000. I could always go back to being a waitress. That, at that point, fine, I'll do that. And they hired me. And the only reason that they didn't fire me is while I was working for them, one of the people in charge of making sure everything stays ethical there, realized what the broker did was illegal, told me I should sue Merrill Lynch, gave me the name of the lawyer, and I sued Merrill Lynch while I was working for them, since I knew they were going to fire me anyway. But because I sued them, they could not fire me. By the time it came to court, I was their number 6 producing broker. So it was hard, you guys. And even though I get that there's all these women supporting other women, and we now have more of a voice and everything like that, one reason that I brought out again after 10 years of it being away, the Women and Money book, is because women still don't have a financial voice. And if we think that the government's going to save us, that men are going to promote us, that other women are going to promote us, I'm here to tell you the only person that's ever going to get you to where you want to go is you, and you alone. But you have to be willing to go for it at all odds. You have to be willing to give to yourself as much as you give of yourself. You have got to say no out of love for yourself versus yes out of fear that somebody else won't like you or you won't get the part. So is it harder today than it was when I started? I don't know. But I think it's hard for a woman to really be as strong as she was born to be.
It's always been so inspiring to see the strength that you both put out there visibly, but also that you encourage other women to take on and own. And I love how you talk about that your self-worth determines your net worth. The question that I keep coming back to is, in the early 80s when you were working for Merrill Lynch and you sued them, I mean, most women are socialized to have this don't rock the boat kind of view, or let's be team players and not be too selfish and only look out for ourselves, which of course men have no trouble just having as their worldview. Where did that strength come from?
One of the reasons why it is so important, especially again, and I'm going to keep plugging it because I love this book so much, it's not even funny, the Women and Money book, because I've seen the millions of lives that it's transformed when it first came out in 2007. And, there's a financial empowerment plan in there. And if you follow those steps and you know what it's like to now be financially independent because you've been able to retire. So hopefully you have millions and millions and millions of dollars and you could be retired all the way until you're 90 or 100 years of age. And so it's important that when you have at least an 8-month emergency fund, when you don't have credit card debt, when you know you've been funding your retirement accounts, when you know that your car is paid for, when you know that your home is on, track to be paid for when you're retired or whatever it may be, you have this power that it's okay. I want this job, but I don't need it. And when you don't need it, you come from a whole nother place. And so I can tell you so many stories about how the first year I was on CNBC on the Suze Orman show, and I didn't like the contract that they offered me at all. And I had my own firm. I was fine then at that point. And this was 2001, I think. And I looked at that. I said, I'm not signing that contract. They said, well, then we are not going to pay you. And I said, I don't care. Do you know I worked for an entire year with no contract? and no pay.
Wow.
And then what happened in there is that what the ratings started to go, and I was now the number one rated show on CNBC. And then we signed a contract the second year, exactly the contract that I wanted. So when you come from a place of power, when you make those that you're dependent on a paycheck for dependent upon you, you can sense that. And then you don't have to be afraid.
In that first Merrill Lynch job, you had the audacity to sue them. Did you feel your power then, or was it a fake it till you make it kind of moment?
That was, I felt powerful because the head of operations told me to do it. And so that made me feel powerful. But what really made me feel powerful more than anything is that because I was the first woman hired there in the Oakland office, all the secretaries had told me that the manager and the sales manager will expect me to sleep with them if I am going to get any leads or any clients or good accounts that they could hand down to me. And I went, well, that's interesting. You know, when he said, you know, that women belong barefoot and pregnant, he was going to be the one to make me pregnant. I've been gay my entire life. So I know what it feels like to be in the minority, because when I came out in the early 60s, it wasn't like it is now. Trust me on that one. So I think the fact that I had the ability to always know who I was and not to be afraid of being that way, I walked right into the manager's office and I looked at him and I said, if you ever approach me in a disrespectful way, I am going to cut your pecker off. With that, I walked out of his office. But a very interesting thing happened when I did that. He started to respect me. It was almost as if that was a bigger turn on than if he could have conquered me and slept with me. Because I didn't care. Because truthfully, he told me he was going to fire me. I thought I was going to be fired. I had nothing to lose. But it was like, don't go there with me, boyfriend. It isn't going to happen. And because I said it really loud, there were a lot of brokers in the office. You saw one phone going to another phone. By the time I got back to my little cubicle, the whole office knew what I had just said to this man. And they loved it because the secretaries hated what they had to do. And the other brokers loved that I did that because they hated that their secretaries had to do it. And the brokers that were screwing their secretaries, they started to think, I better not do that either. So this whole thing started. They started to embrace me rather than to reject me because I stood in my power.
I love that. I love that you said that to him.
I actually said effing pecker.
Yeah, even better. Even better. Running a business of one means you wear many hats. Marketer, content creator, CEO, office custodian. There are many things that demand your attention, and you need all the assistance you can get.
That's why cloud accounting software FreshBooks is so cool. They take the work out of getting paid so you can focus on doing the work you need to keep your business running. With FreshBooks, you can create a customized invoice, track all your income, and link a business credit card to automatically track business spending.
FreshBooks makes it super simple to do your accounting. The website is clean and easy to understand, and it makes accounting one less thing that you need to worry about as a business owner.
Most accounting services come with lots of bells and whistles that you don't need as a freelancer, and FreshBooks cuts all of that out to make it as easy to use as possible. We've both used it and can attest to it being the easiest possible way to do your accounting, and maybe the prettiest.
Plus, FreshBooks has recently gotten into the events game, which you know I love, with their hashtag #IMakeALiving events around the US. They talk to freelancers and small business owners about how they make a living, which is something that we both think is pretty cool.
Head to freshbooks.com/TFC to claim your 30-day free trial and enter the Fairer Cents in the How Did You Hear About Us section. It's a win-win. You get something free while supporting the Fairer Cents. Join the 24 million people who've used FreshBooks already. That's freshbooks.com/TFC.
I love a good side hustle. They're how I paid off my student loans, and they'll always have a place in my heart. One of the cutest side hustles is dog walking, or dog sitting, or dog cuddling, or anything to do with dogs, really. Rover is the largest network of 5-star pet sitters and dog walkers in North America, and it's a great side hustle. If you want to make cash to pay off your debt or to pad your savings, visit rover.com/cents and click Become a Sitter. Enter the fairer cents in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know you're a listener. Sitters with Rover set their own rates, hours, and the services they offer. Not into dog walking? That's cool. You can get into some doggy daycare action. Rover side hustlers use the app to get paid, communicate with pet owners, and are covered by the Rover Guarantee, which provides coverage in case some scenarios go a little sideways. Visit rover.com/cents and click Become a Sitter, then enter your name, zip code, email, and password, and click Get Started if you're ready for an adorable side hustle. That's rover.com/CENTS. What advice would you give to young, gay, bi, queer, non-binary folks today? Because like you said, you've been out since the 1960s and we're living in a different world. So when these folks are navigating their career, do you have any advice for them?
I was, like I said, I was gay my whole life and I never hid it. And so when I met somebody, the very first thing I would always say to them is, I'm gay. It would be one of the very first things that I said, and I'll never forget. In 1996, when it was 9 Steps to Financial Freedom, was the book that Binky, my agent, was shopping. And it went to Crown. Chip Gibson was the publisher at the time of Crown. And they paid me $800,000. And I was like, are you kidding? Somebody's paying me $800,000 to write a book? Given that my first book advance on You've Earned It, Don't Lose It was $10,000. I thought you made money on a book by selling a book. I never knew you made money on a book by somebody giving you, millions of dollars up front to write a book, which eventually started to happen. But so I went to him and I said, Chip, I have 2 things to tell you. I said, number 1, I don't know how to write. I was dyslexic. I had a speech impediment. So words such as R's, S's, and, I couldn't pronounce R's, S's, and T's. So words such as beautiful came out as boobital. And because I couldn't write, I couldn't read. And I've written more New York Times bestsellers now than books I've ever written. I remember when I told Oprah that. She said, don't tell people that, Suze. I went, why? I'm kind of proud of that. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. And he said, oh, finally an author who knows that they can't write. And I went, all right, whatever that means. And I said, I got to tell you something else, Chip. I said, I'm a lesbian. And so if people ask me, I'm going to tell them. So I don't want you paying $800,000 for me. And then all of a sudden people find out and then you're going to lose money. And he said, Suze, we know you're gay. And I said, okay, just wanted to make sure. Every job, when it was on CNBC, it was the first thing I told them. Every time somebody wanted to do a deal with me, that they were investing in me, I said, I'm gay. You know that, right? They go, yeah. And it was almost as if everybody knew without me having to say anything. And it was just because I owned it so. It was easy for me all the time. Now I get that isn't how it is all the time. The main person that it was hard with was my mother and father. My father did not like it on any level, and he let it be known. Later on, my mom stopped telling me that she loved me, and all she cared about was that I was famous, and it was not good in her ending years. And she lived till she was 97. And I asked my aunt, I said, why did my mother hate me so? Why, Auntie, when she say she loved me? And my aunt said to me, Suze, she didn't hate you. She just never could accept that you were gay. She just couldn't take it. And it was like, but why was she nice to KT, who's my spouse and I've been with now for 18 years and everything? She said, I don't know, Suze, but she just could never accept it. So I suffered in not having the one person that I wanted most in my life to be loving me. She was proud of me, and that's all she cared was that I was famous. She didn't care about anything else. She showed me off, but she never showed me her love. how do other people do it? You have to love who you are, and you have to know who you are. And if I were to tell you that being gay and being a lesbian is the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life, I would be telling you the absolute truth. And when I went to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, I had a gay women's house back then, 1969 to 73, where gay women would come. And, I was very much in the forefront of the lesbian movement. And because I was gay, I had to always fight on some level to just be able to say it and show it. And because I was able to do that, I was able to do anything in life. So being gay allowed me to become who I am. The money lady didn't allow me to be gay. Being gay allowed me to become the money lady.
In chapter 3, You Are Not on Sale, I really loved this chapter. You say, when you devalue what you do, it becomes inevitable that you and those around you devalue who you are. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's sort of been the journey that I've been on this year. Is I'm so used to being the person without a ton of money. I'm so used to being the person who has to have a couple of different side hustles, and you reinforce this narrative for yourself. So I was just wondering if you had anything else to say along those lines.
Yeah. If you give your all to one thing, then that one thing will give you all that you want. And sometimes it's a risk. Sometimes it's like, but there's not enough money. So yeah, you have to do a few side hustles, as you call them. But that doesn't mean that you can't give all of your passion to the one thing that you really want to succeed. Like, there is no reason why this podcast can't be heard everywhere with millions of women listening to it and you making millions of dollars. There's no reason that can't happen. Mm-hmm. But you have to give all to this podcast, every ounce of your soul when you're doing it. When you hear me speaking this, you have no idea how many interviews I have given in the past week. You have no idea. I mean, I've already given almost 10 today. Mm-hmm. Right. But listen to my voice and listen to the passion in my voice. And there is no way that I could talk about this topic ever enough. I live this. I breathe this. I want this, not just for myself. I want it for all of you, because that's what I want my legacy to be. So that is why I've always said you have to be more to have more. You have to have self-worth in order to have net worth. So in the beginning of this book, the question is, what is your greatest fear in life when it comes to your money? Because it is that fear that is possibly holding you back. And where does that fear come from? And again, it probably comes from the first memory you have when it comes to money. And somehow you have to learn to break the chain from your past to where you are now. And you do so by creating a new truth. So when I was scared to death to become a stockbroker, after they hired me, I didn't belong there. I was a waitress for 7 years, making $400 a month. I drove a 1967 Volvo station wagon when all the brokers drove 1980 Mercedes and every fancy car in the world. I parked on the street to get tickets and ate every day at Taco Bell when they all went out to eat fancy lunches, parked in a parking lot, and I didn't have the money to do that. And so I was scared to death. So I created a new truth saying, I am young, powerful, and successful, producing at least $10,000 a month. I was not that young. I was almost 30. I was 30 years of age at this time. Right? I was not powerful. I was as powerless as they came. I was, not successful, obviously, and producing at least $10,000 a month. There were times that my father didn't even make $10,000 a year, but I repeated that truth. Sometimes all it takes is for you to have a truth to rely on, that every time you're afraid, you say it. Every time you think you can't, you say it, and you write it, and you do it. Do not get in your way of what God has planned for you, because you might just be preventing the most extraordinary life you could ever live.
Okay, so you guys have now heard the Suze conversation. It was edited. We actually got a lot of time with her, which was really wonderful and generous. But we cut out a lot of the stuff that you've heard before, or that if you've heard other interviews with her, you've heard her say. And we really tried to press her to talk about her beginnings or how she became a strong woman. And I think you heard in there, it was so clear to us how hard it is to be strong and vulnerable. Her whole persona is built on being this kick-ass person who like takes no shit from anybody. And you could hear hints of vulnerability, of having started from a different place, of having grown into that strong persona. And it was clearly very hard for her to reveal that stuff to us. So I think it was really wonderful when she did kind of share some of the beginnings, some of the early doubts that she had, because, you know, she's human just like the rest of us. She's just grown to kind of a superhuman level.
She really has. And I really appreciated that vulnerability, because it's like I was saying earlier, your vulnerability is just as much a part of you as your strength. And in fact, I think feeds into your strength a lot. And we're living in a time where it's so easy to see someone's successes only, just the highlight reel of social media or of articles that only focus on the billionaires who have made it. And it's always so refreshing and humanizing to hear someone say, this was hard for me. I was uncomfortable in that. I grew into this. I didn't always feel this way. I wasn't always as confident, and now I am. It's also nice to see that glow up. Like, that is certainly, we all come from places where we learn and grow and change and get more confident as we do. And I feel like sometimes I look around and I'm like, oh my God, everyone is already so confident. Did they ever question? And so it's just nice to hear someone say, yeah, I did question. Yeah, I did feel a little self-conscious. Yeah, I did have to get to this place. I didn't just arrive here.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting, actually. Part of the conversation we had with her was before we started recording. I wanted to tell her, because the truth is that Suze was really instrumental for me. Like, I don't love everything she says or everything she's ever done, but there was a time in my financial life when she was the person there telling me how to get things on track. And I'm really grateful for that. And so before we started recording, I said to her, like, hey, Suze, I just want to thank you for being there with this information for me, basically right place at the right time, when I used to have more debt than I had income. And now, not that many years later, I've retired early. And so I just wanted to share that. I mean, like, who doesn't meet someone who's been instrumental and want to thank them for that? But this was really surprising to me, because she's so all about like stand in your truth and own your power. And, you know, those are like her catchphrases. She kind of deflected that. She said, oh, well, I didn't do that. You did that. You saved that money. And I was like, yeah, don't worry. I'm confident in that. I know what I did. But also, like, you still helped me. You still gave me the information that got me started. And that's worth saying thank you for. But she really tried to put it back on me as like, no, you did that. You did that. I just thought that was fascinating and very contradictory, given how much she tells us all to stand in our power, because it should be easy to say, you, of course, did the work, but you're so welcome for the info. Like, that's all it would have been. So I just saw in that a very human struggle. Like, I think especially as women, we're so socialized to deflect thanks or to say, oh, no problem, instead of saying you're welcome if someone says thank you. So it was interesting to just note that, like, Suze's human too on that kind of thing.
So Suze is about 35 years older than me. And so to see someone who is in a totally different generation than I am and has had totally different life experiences kind of do the same thing that we often criticize young women for kind of cracks me up, kind of makes me sad. It's also really, really interesting to me. This whole conversation was really interesting to me. Going back to this idea of, has our definition of what is a strong woman changed? I don't know that millennials or people who are 25 right now love Suze, because her experience is so different. And some of her advice feels really dated or feels like it lacks nuance for this new conversation that is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Something that, obviously we talk about a lot on this show. I talk about a lot in my work with Bravely and just in my life, is the nuances of how your gender affects your money, your race affects your money, your relationship status affects your money. And I don't always hear that from older generations. It seems to be much more black and white. you work for this amount, you ask for this amount, you climb up this ladder. And so that's something that I find really, really fascinating.
Oh, and I totally agree. I mean, she came up at a time where you had to be just like the boy to succeed. And I think she built her brand on tough love. And I'm going to tell you how it is. And this is the truth. And so I totally agree with you that she's lacking nuance. And also some of the comments that she's made about the early retirement movement, I think she's definitely a bit out of touch with what stuff really costs, let's say. Like if you look at how she is talked about, and then you look at somebody else who's a similar age, who's had a similar kind of level of career, somebody like Dave Ramsey, I'll often hear people say about Dave, who, let's be honest, Dave is shitty about women. You know, he won't ride in the elevator with women in his office. He's like, oh God. But people will go like, oh yeah, Dave has kind of this like religious bent, but you know, his advice is really solid. I don't feel like people say that same thing about Suze. They'll go like, oh God, she's like so out of touch. Or they'll say like, oh, she's really abrasive. And then that somehow negates all of her really good, solid advice, which I think is reflective of the different standard that women are held to. If you have to be perfect and likable and smart and strong, but still likable, and all of that to be considered at the same level of credibility, where like a guy can have major flaws and people are willing to look past that and still acknowledge the good there. Like to me, yeah, not everyone's going to like Suze. She definitely has a style that isn't for everyone, but she has helped so many people and her advice is generally very sound. So it's just interesting to kind of hear it in that way too. And that's something that I hope is changing, but I don't know. I also think a lot of millennials write her off because of her style and miss the substance that's there too. So yeah, I don't know. We have a long way to go.
Oh my gosh. I think you're so spot on about the Dave Ramsey stuff. And I think too, like, obviously we know men get a pass that women don't get the same pass on, but that ain't right.
That ain't right. It ain't at all.
So anyway, obviously there's a lot to this. There's a lot to Suze. Gosh, she is really incredible though. I will say, I just think it's so awesome to see any woman succeed. And it is awesome to see a very unapologetic woman succeed. I do love that because I do feel like, and know for a fact, we've talked about it on the show, we've talked about it before in life, women are socialized to be docile, to put others in front of them, to literally say sorry for everything. And I love that Suze really did thrive by being unapologetic and with her tough love stuff. I think even if I don't agree with everything she's ever said or the entirety of her personal and financial beliefs, I do think it is a step forward for all women to have more unapologetic women in the public eye.
Absolutely. And going into the interview, we had a list of questions for her where we had the ones that were like, okay, we're definitely asking these. And then we had the questions where we thought, well, we'll just see how it goes and how our rapport is. But one of those questions was asking her about being gay and having sort of the, not just trying to be a woman in such a man's world of finance, but also being a gay woman, having kind of two strikes against her. We were sort of thinking like, okay, how can we sort of soft play that question and feel her out if she's comfortable talking about it? But she was so open and she went there on her own. And I think her talking about that to me was just so powerful. So I hope that that's something that our queer listeners, you know, got more out of, because I know that she's someone who's very important to a lot of gay women as just someone who's been out and open for a long time. So yeah, I think to your point about unapologetic and like talking about these things as though they're not delicate issues, because they're not. This is her life. That's like how she lives every day. Like, why should she be apologetic for who she is or her sexuality or who she loves?
Big thank you to Suze for coming on the show and for being so generous with her time when we interviewed her. As always, we want to hear your thoughts. If you love Suze, hate Suze, had never heard of her before this show, send us an email. You can always email us at fairsense@gmail.com. And you can always find us on Twitter. I'm on Twitter way too much, at fairsense, just on Twitter. I felt like I needed to be like at fairsense@gmail.com again, but that's the email. That's not the Twitter.
And if you enjoy what you've been hearing, please leave us a review, especially if you are an iPhone person and listen in iTunes. Even just going in and punching a star review is great and it helps us spread the word about the show, helps us keep it going with sponsors and all that good stuff. And thank you to all of you who left really incredible reviews in the off season. We text about them and just go like, oh my God, who are these amazing, amazing women? But thank you so much to all of you for listening, for reviewing the show. You are the best.
You really are. If you say something nice about the podcast somewhere on the internet, Instagram DMs, Twitter, in a review, trust that I have a screenshot of it on my phone and I read it and I'm like, ah! People are so great. So thank you. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
Yeah, I completely echo that thank you. And we have got such an action-packed, incredible lineup of shows waiting for you for season 3 that I'm just like bursting at the seams, like waiting to share them. I can't even contain the excitement.
Honestly, it's like, you know that meme that was going around for a while? It was like bangs, fist on table, asterisk. You know, we want more oranges or something. This was a while ago. I may be dating myself, but I'm like, bangs, fist on table. Season 3 is gonna be awesome.
So unfortunately, we can't share it all with you today, all at once, but it's coming. So stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing. And until next week, you guys, stay rad.
Stay rad.
The Fairer Sense are Kara Perez and me, Tanya Hester. Our theme song is by The Insider. All the rest of the music you heard on the show is courtesy of the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. Huge thanks, you rad robot. You can always find me at Our Next Life and Kara at bravelygo.co.